Hey everybody, it's Norm from Tested.
And it's Jeremy from Tested.
Welcome to a special episode of Projections, because we're going to talk about the Magic Leap 1 this week.
Some real augmented reality finally. No virtual reality on the table at all.
Not at all. This is a device that's been in development for 6 years.
Yeah, the company was founded like 8 years ago.
And it's been highly secretive, highly anticipated, shrouded in mystery, to say the least. It was released last week to the public, and we were able to get a unit from someone who bought this. DevKit, thank you, anonymous, generous donor and fan of Tested. And we've been using it for the past week. Let's get it right off the bat. We think this is probably the most impressive augmented reality device you can buy right now.
That's right, and there aren't that many out there. Like we've tried products from Augmented, we've tried the HoloLens, we've tried the Jedi Challenges app for the phone. This is definitely the best on a couple counts. However, that comes with some caveats.
It's definitely much room for improvement, and as you've probably read, may not meet the high expectations that Magic Leap and some of the press have set out for this device ahead of its release. But let's dive deep down into augmented reality in general, because it's different from a lot of the VR we've covered.
It is.
As a quick refresher, virtual reality, we've used the Oculus Rift, the HTC Vive, headsets that obscure your field of view so that you are immersed and present in a virtual world.
Big old bricks that you wear on your face with a screen on them, and you can't see the real world outside of it.
Augmented reality, on the other hand, is supposed to, or mixed reality, as some people call it, it's supposed to combine a virtual object, overlay a virtual object on top of the real world using some type of technology, lens technology.
Right, but it's not doesn't stop there. It's not just an object that is where you can also see reality behind it. Ideally, augmented reality should also map the world so that you can actually place objects onto reality, into reality. So it's aware of the walls, it's aware of the floors, tables, objects in the space, so that they can exist within reality.
Both a structural, geometric understanding of our reality, what the hard surfaces are, what moving objects are, and maybe even a semantic understanding of our reality, what may be a hand versus a chair or a table. That's what we want AR to be. The Magic Leap 1 it's a developer kit.
Yep.
Their first product, and it's $2,300. For that, you get a set of devices, which essentially boils down to 3 components.
You got the computer puck,
yes,
the headset, and the controller.
Yeah, we'll talk about the computer first, because probably the easiest to understand. Whereas a device like Microsoft's HoloLens, or even a VR device like the Oculus Go, has all of its brains in the thing that you wear, Magic Leap chose to put its computer on a wearable pack. And the design of this, I think, is rather clever. It is in essentially 2 components, a battery and the computing section.
Right, and it looks like a clip. You'd think you'd be able to clip it onto your pants or a pocket. It doesn't actually move. There's no hinge. It's not a clip, but it does slide on, and it is little grooves on the inside that grab onto your pant pocket. And
they really encourage that you not put the whole thing in a pocket, a jacket pocket, or a pant pocket, because the computer that's inside here, which is a NVIDIA Tegra X2, 8 gigs of RAM, 128 gigs of storage, essentially a nice tablet computer, it can get warm and hot.
It does, and it has an active cooling system inside of it, so it needs that air that's able to go through it.
Yeah, so from a use perspective, you attach this, clip it, put the battery portion of this in your pocket. This is by far the heaviest part of the Magic Leap.
And very smart of them to offload that to your pocket. I didn't mind the small tether that's between them, and I didn't want that weight on my head.
Yeah, for people who don't have pockets, who may be wearing outfits like dresses, for example, they also will sell, and they're going to give this to the early adopters for free, a $40 strap, shoulder strap, which you can use, and that will then fix it to your person.
This cable, by the way, that connects the headset to the computer is completely permanent. There's no way to detach it.
That's right. So affixing to this is I'd say about a 3 foot long, about a yard long cable, plenty long, goes to then the headset, but then wirelessly connected, I want to talk about is the controller.
Sure, yeah. So the controller kind of resembles the Oculus Go controller with a touchpad up top that is actually much better than the Oculus Go controller. I found the fidelity and response to be much better. And it has 3 buttons. It has one here, which they call the home button, and then 2 here, a trigger and a bumper.
Yeah, for people who care about physical controllers, the top touchpad is really often used as like a dial in a lot of the UI. Actually has haptic feedback and a linear actuator on the inside, so when it's unpowered, you don't feel it, but when you can actually do something, you can feel that response, kind of like a trackpad on your MacBook.
It also has a LED ring around the outside, which actually serves very little purpose when you're using augmented reality because it's not quite bright enough to see and you're not looking at it that often, but it does serve to tell you how much battery life is left in it, and it does some interesting effects when you shut it down and things like that. But more importantly, this is 6 degrees tracked. So way unlike the Oculus Go controller, it is tracked all around your space, whether or not this thing can see it or not. So this is not optically tracked. We think that it's tracked using a magnetic system, and it employs this little box right here on the side.
Yeah, so much like the Razer Hydra or the STEM system that was developed, not at all like what you would see on the Oculus Rift with their touch controllers or the Vive with outside-in tracking.
Right.
It's not IR light from this controller. Our IR camera saw nothing being emitted from this. But with even assuming it is that magnetic field control, it's pretty good.
No, it's pretty great. I mean, compared to, we've seen the Santa Cruz prototype and other optically tracked things like the Microsoft VR headsets. Those are great when this is in the field of view of the cameras, but once you move out here, there's nothing. It can still maintain orientation tracking, but it can't get positional. And that positional tracking is very useful, especially when you're using a laser pointer. The one thing that I will say, though, is that it's not as accurate as an optical system or like as the IR system that the Rift uses, but it's always there. So it's kind of a trade-off.
Yeah. The laser pointer is not actually even employed in its main UI. It is in some of the experiences.
You suggested you wished it were.
I wish it was, and maybe that is magically not trusting the accuracy or the drift of this 6 degrees of freedom tracking system.
Right. A couple apps that do use a laser pointer, which I agree with you is actually preferable. The laser pointer comes out of the top, and it does. It drifts behind it. It's not quite as accurate as you would expect from a VR headset controller.
Right. It also doesn't give me full hand presence, and maybe that's one of the reasons that there's only one controller.
Right.
And they want to encourage hand tracking as maybe a future interaction modal. With this controller, though, laser pointer, there's also a trigger here. Something I didn't like is that while it is an analog trigger, no final clicking. Like if you like on the Vive 1, it clicks. So
right, and they could even use the linear actuator to do that maybe, just to give you something.
I know, but hand tracking is made possible, and there's even eye tracking on the headset here because there's a lot of technology going on in this headset. We're saving the best for last.
Let's talk about the headset.
So ergonomically, it's super light.
It's what is it, like 500 grams or so? Is that
if that?
Really?
And it opens up in the back in a really interesting way.
No, it's cool. And it's very easy to put on, to put off. I like the PlayStation VR headset. I like the Rift, but this is actually slightly easier because there's not a pulling back, it's a pulling outwards, which is just more comfortable to do.
And in terms of the fit of this to your head, because alignment between this headset and your eyes is incredibly important for how you see the images, there are actually 2 versions of this headset. There's one for people with wide IPDs, your interpupillary distance. Anything higher than a 60 IPD, they may recommend the large one.
That's what this is.
And anything smaller, they have a smaller one. In addition to that, there's also replaceable nose bridges of different lengths. So these are very, very simple to snap in on the bottom. And it's basically the distance between the point between your eyes and the bottom of your bridge.
Yeah, I thought that was smart and nice touch. I mean, you are paying $2,300 for this. You expect them to go the extra mile. That's a nice touch.
There's also 2 magnetically removable pieces on the inside. One is just the forehead pad. One's a thicker version. One's a smaller version with people with different size foreheads. Very easy to snap on. And then finally on the inside as well, something that is not enabled for us because we don't have the actual lenses, piece here for corrective lenses, because while technically you could shove your glasses between the headset and your face.
And we've tried that, it does work.
It does work. They encourage, if you need glasses, to use prescription lenses that they will also sell.
A note on the IPD, I was curious to see if my kids would be able to see anything at all through this, because my 8-year-old, her pupils are probably at the distance of the very inner side of the waveguide in here. she put it on, she could see everything. So
Oh.
I was very surprised by that. I don't know quite if she's seeing everything, but she was able to discern the whole environment. She was able to use the apps. So this being the wide IPD version, I wouldn't say that it's like you can't see anything if you get the wrong version.
Right.
It's just slightly better, custom made for your IPD.
Absolutely. On the outside, you can also see there are a bunch of cameras and IR emitters. So the IR emitters are used to blast out into the world.
It's a single IR emitter,
right
right?
in the center. And then the cameras then detect that and then in real time start building out its image of the world. On the inside,
this is a world mapping solution that does build upon itself.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's not like some solutions we've seen before, which are every frame is its own construction of the world. This has to map your environment. So the first thing that you do once you put the headset on is look all around your room until it's satisfied that it has a general sense of where the walls, floors, ceilings, objects are.
and the idea behind that is that it wants to retain memory of your space.
Right.
Because their vision for spatial computing is that you're going to drop in, just as on your desktop, you drop in windows and folders. You may put AR objects in the world, and it wants you to be able to know every time you enter your bedroom, that virtual TV screen is always going to be in the same place.
It's a strong promise. I will say it never remembered any of my environments.
Yeah, most of the time, and we've been handing this headset back and forth between our houses. We'd had to rescan and reconstruct, even between applications.
It does promise, though, if it doesn't recognize your environment, there's the option to try to re-engage the memory once it does recognize your environment.
On the inside, there are actually IR lights pointing toward your eyes.
Little
and
LEDs.
Little LEDs, and also cameras, because this does have eye tracking.
Yes, and I'm not sure if it's put to an extensive use. It is clearly used to detect your convergence. So if your eyes start to go cross-eyed, looking at an object that's close to you, it uses that to inform the accommodation solution that they have, which is a whole discussion into itself.
And we're going to jump into it right now. We're going to talk about this display, kind of like the big secret sauce, the mystery of Magic Leap. If you read that Wired story from a couple years ago when they first visited Magic Leap, they said that Magic Leap potentially solved with what they call their photonic chip, their display, the convergence accommodation conflict.
Right, and now we know from VR, all of the VR consumer headsets that are out there, they're all rendered at infinity. So everything that your eye is focused on is essentially at infinity. There's two ways the eye is focused. One is convergence, where we go cross-eyed, and that is a matter of measuring stereo vision. So we need two eyes in order to do that. That's what VR headsets have done well since their inception, and this does that as well too. But what this promised to do is, in addition, it's this accommodation solution.
Which is your eye's natural ability to focus near and far. You can test this out right now. Close one of your eyes and hold your hand up and focus on the near object, your hand, or on the far object. You're changing focus.
One will be out of focus, as if you're focusing a camera. And that's the kind of thing that we don't have in VR yet. And we haven't had in AR headsets. And this was the great promise of this.
Well, it's kind of more important for AR because
Absolutely.
you're mixing also the real world.
That is an excellent point. Like this is a solution that we look forward to having to in VR, but it's not necessary. For a true, successful VR solution, I think you do, because you are focusing on objects in the real world that may be close to you, that may be far away, and they need those virtual objects to appear at the same distance.
So one way to solve this conflict is actually to render the virtual objects in many different focal planes. And a lot of AR companies tried experimenting with numerous different techniques to combine images and multi-render so that you can shift between near and far. What we've discovered, what we think this is on the technology based in this headset, is basically two focal planes using what's commonly known as waveguide technology. Waveguides, as a basic primer, is a way to redirect light. Think of it as a prism or a very flat series of mirrors that are engineered either through a variety of very expensive manufacturing processes.
Absolutely. It's basically a sheet of glass where you can project an image into it and it exits out in a different position. It's awesome technology, very expensive, but it's also what's used in the HoloLens.
Yeah, and based on some of the patents that have been released by Magic Leap, what we think is in this headset is a series of two sets of waveguides. One RGB, so you get your red, green, blue, and that's focused for one field, one distance, and then another set, RGB, that's focused for a nearer distance. And we can actually detect that when using this headset.
You can actually trick the headset into rendering the wrong distance by making your eyes go cross-eyed. All of the renderings go slightly fuzzy. It's slightly different, and that's because they're moving it towards you or further away for that accommodation. The problem is 2 is not enough. But when we saw the patents on this, we saw they were trying to go for maybe 6 or more focal layers. They couldn't do that, so they ended up with 2. People were concerned 6 wouldn't be enough. I'm not even sure that that the pros outweigh the cons, because there are many false positives with this.
Yeah, the way they're doing about it, not only is it the 2 focal planes may not be enough, and that
Right.
we have to term that with long-term usage, but also the way they've implemented, the focal plane that's closest to you is essentially about 18 inches from your face. It doesn't really fit into that near field area where things get really interesting.
Right.
Like if I'm putting my hand out here to far away, yes, there's a difference, but objects here are where I really care about having accommodation.
And that's certainly in VR where things get very interesting. It feels like they're in your personal space.
Yeah.
They actually have a hard limit on how close you can get to objects.
Right,
They have a
right.
clipping mask that is about 18 inches away from you, maybe a foot, and anything that comes closer than that, it disappears. It goes through a clip, and it's like you have put your head through a wall in a game engine.
They never let you show any virtual object rendered close to you, which I think takes away from the potential of AR.
Right. I almost wish they wouldn't do that. I wish there was an option to disable it, because I don't think it would be a real problem unless you're trying to focus on something in reality that's right here, in addition to the augmented reality.
The other thing is that this is active switching between those focal planes, and this is where they make use of the eye tracking. They're tracking to whether your eyes are actually converging, and that's most noticeable when you're looking down toward the center, because that's where those cameras are. And when it thinks your eyes are looking at something close, it will change the rendering so that objects closer are rendered sharper.
Right.
And with that, for that waveguide, and when it thinks you're looking far away, it'll render that, and you can see the shift.
Yes.
And there's a noticeable delay.
There is.
It's very small.
When you change your focus to something in the distance, it snaps back, but your eyes are there before
Yeah.
it actually re-renders it. Now, on the other side, there's the whole slam that this thing does, this simultaneous localization and mapping, where it maps the whole world and it places objects into the world, and you can move your head around. That is great.
Yeah.
Like, that is one-to-one. I'm super impressed by that. Normally with AR headsets, you move your head and the augmented objects, they sort of whoosh behind it, because there's some latency involved. There's a lot of calculating to do. There's rendering, and to keep up with reality, which is real time, you have to do some super fast calculations, and they managed to do that. So that is actually quite responsive.
And it's not only responsive in real time, when you can turn on a setting and see the dots as it's mapping out the geometry of
Right.
your world. There are applications where you can even refine that geometry. I'll tell you to stare at a certain corner, and it'll build in that geometry.
It tends to constantly build. That, however, I feel like it reaches a threshold where it stops building, where it maxes out maybe the RAM
Yes.
or some kind of storage that it has. And I did get to a point where I wanted a little bit more, because I wanted to fill in some gaps, or I had a hallway that wasn't resolved yet.
Right, and it doesn't work well because it is just IR blasters and cameras with reflective objects. Windows, TV, very reflective TV screens, it just won't map those surfaces. And I don't think there's a semantic understanding. It doesn't know a table is a table. It may know a ceiling is a ceiling and the ground is a ground, but not objects within that room.
Right, and you need to be able to be within a certain distance. The ceilings in the tested office are unresolvable because they're too high. We probably have, 30-foot ceilings here. It won't reach that far. The IR emitter or the camera can't resolve that. Geometry, like tables, they exist, but they're kind of low res. They're kind of low poly, I should say. The actual mesh that it puts around them have curves where they don't exist, and their edges aren't exactly precise. But it's better than nothing. I mean, it's actually quite cool.
I think it's really cool.
When you can lay objects on them. That's really quite neat. We'll go into it, but you can put things like a knight that walks around a table, and he'll get to the edge and he'll fall off. Like, that's something you can't do with virtual reality.
Yeah. Now, the other final thing about the imaging system is, and I'm sure you've read about this, the field of view, right? Which is really important for augmented reality systems. How much of what you see can actually be filled with virtual objects?
I feel like this is going to be a hard point for them to get everybody on board on, because their advertisements for this have been really, truly phenomenal. The effects fill the field of view of the renderings that they do when they show off the effects that this is capable of.
The whale jumping out of the gymnasium.
Right, but in reality, you see the projected image and it's cropped within a larger field of view of your natural world.
And which is calculated to be about a 50-degree diagonal, 40-degree horizontal, 30-degree vertical, Pythagoras, 3, 4, 5. And compared to another augmented reality system like the HoloLens, the aspect ratio of that field of view is actually different. For Magic Leap, it's 4:3, but for HoloLens, it's 16:9. And I really appreciate having that extra vertical field of view, even if it's just a little bit, in the Magic Leap.
That's interesting, because you think 16:9 is going to be wider and more immersive, but actually the 4:3 is closer to like an IMAX experience, right? Whereas actually you want that filled in on the top and bottom as well.
Especially when you're encouraged to interact with objects that may be up there or down here.
Right, and it is a wider field of view in general than the HoloLens, and that's one of the places where this really is one of the best AR experiences that we've seen.
And maybe that limited field of view is also why they don't let you put objects close to your face, because then only small objects would be fully resolved.
Small objects, or you're seeing them cropped out. But I don't mind that. If you're getting that close to something, you're already seeing it cropped. You are, once you're at that, whatever that is, 1 foot away, you're seeing it cropped already, more than likely. But that's when it starts to look cool. Like, I really start to see the resolution of the images. We don't know what the resolution of these projectors, these displays are, but it's limited, and so you want to get close to things to see it resolve, text, or even just 3D objects.
Animations.
Yeah.
Look really good.
Photographs.
Up
Even,
close.
They have a gallery up in here, and the photographs are neat. You can put them on your wall and walk around them, but you don't see the resolution unless you get really close.
I think there's also a disconnect between what we expect to be the images, the type of images we expect to see in augmented reality, and what we're seeing in waveguide-based augmented reality, which, there is a glowy, color fringy effect that's a byproduct of the technology. Everything is bright, yet not fully opaque. Everything is bright colors. They actually had to tint the lens in here, so the world is reduced. It's almost about a stop, like an ND filter, down, as if you're wearing sunglasses. I'm okay with that.
I actually think that they came up with a great compromise with this. The lenses are kind of like sunglasses, but they're not so bad that you can't wear them inside. I can still see reality just fine when I wear them inside. And that does help to make the images a little more opaque, but the images are quite opaque, given how much of the real world I can still see. So I think that they came up with a really smart compromise.
And we've talked about this in VR. VR objects don't need to be photorealistic for you to feel present, or for you to feel like the object is really there. Same with Magic Leap. I don't think the objects here need to be photorealistic. They can be cartoony. They can be bright. They can be ethereal. And some of the experiences they have really lean into that art style.
Yeah, and to be clear, you will not see a perfectly opaque image in this, of any kind whatsoever. It's 2D, if it's text, if it's a 3D model, they are all going to be like holograms, so they came up with the right name over at Microsoft. It is very much something that exists in the real world, like Pepper's Ghost, right? You made that comparison, which is like the Disneyland effect when you see ghosts floating through the space. You will always see through things that are in this, just by nature of the waveguide system.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the software experiences. Magic Leap has worked with a variety of developers to seed this developer kit with some examples of what they think can work for spatial computing. And I think it's a good start. And it shows some potential, but also shows kind of direction they're aiming in. The UI itself, a floating UI, kind of like icons around a radial screen in space, is their version of a phone's home screen.
Well, that's like the favorites, right? You can then go into the All Apps app, which lists the exact same apps because there aren't that many yet. But and that's more of a grid. But yeah, you mentioned that you can place them, and that's crucial to what they're calling spatial computing. So you can launch an app, and then it will tell you where do you want it, and you look around your space, and then you click it into place, and it will exist there. You can look over here, and you see nothing unless you want to launch an app and place it over there. Then you can look between them, and I find that you can only engage with one, go deep in one, and then the other one might become inaccessible. There's probably a limit of the CPU, the RAM, something about that. But then once you back out, you're back to your environment again, and you can access everything again.
Yeah, and some apps are what you could call full screen or full field of view. They take over the entire application, and I found those to be the most compelling. Because to be honest, the spatial computing stuff, I don't really want to have a web browser taking up the size of a wall with an interactive New York Times media story there. That's not how I want to interact with the web.
I beg to differ. I think you do want that. This is just not capable of showing you the web browser that you want yet. I think you want higher resolution, wider field of view, and they know that. I think they know that that's what people want. They want to wear these glasses and have that be the alternate reality that exists that only you can see.
But that's a type of computing where I'm actively moving around. It's not desktop, literally, in front of a desk anymore. That's computing where I'm in open space, an empty room, and constantly moving between things, when most of us do our computing looking at a phone, at a tablet, or actually at a desk, a desktop. I want desktop AR. But the full screen applications, the ones where you have to buy in already to full room scale style interactions, very compelling. They have a music video, or like a music.
Yes, what is it?
Yeah, it's a music experience.
I thought of it as like a demo scene kind of production.
Yeah.
It's a collaboration with Sior Ros. It's this music group, which I have in my music collection, but I very rarely listen to. But man, this is cool. So this is basically an interactive musical experience. You launch it, and it launches these things into your room. It starts out with some fluttering particles, and then you walk over to it and you touch your hand. This is one of the few apps that actually engages some sort of hand interactivity. And this buzzing, static electricity thing starts to vibrate around your hand, and then it explodes, and it becomes something else. Within this app, which probably takes a half hour to experience the whole thing, various things happen. You have asteroids that are floating in space, and you have to touch them and bring them down into this staticky swamp. It's all very ethereal. There's these sea creatures or plant life that come out of your walls and your floor and your tables. All of the geometry that the headset has scanned, it comes out of that. And you have to engage with it somehow, a little bit of a puzzle. The most impressive thing to me was not necessarily a tech demonstration, but it was this sense that I got. They had this lake of particles that spread out in my living room, and you can engage with it with your hands, and I could hear everything. And just to experiment, I didn't expect this to happen, but I put my head underneath the lake, and the sound changed. It was as though I was underwater.
And this headset does have spatial audio built in.
Yeah,
really important.
Which is actually extremely important. And we've talked about that with the Oculus Go.
And that's 3 degrees of freedom.
How smart that is that they included audio. They know how important audio is to an experience, to a VR experience. Well, they did the same thing here. The speakers are approximately the same place as the Oculus Go, except they point towards your cheeks instead of backwards. And the sound is fine. The sound is good. They also have a headphone jack if you want to use that. But this is interesting because it's 6 degrees, like you said. So you're moving around. And as you would in a 6 degrees tracked VR experience, you can hear things that you can't see. And that creates the much stronger illusion of what you only can see a narrow field of view of existing, of actually having a wider existence.
Right. Were you more impressed about that experience because it was interacting with the objects in your physical space, the walls and the tables?
And they employed some just effects to show that off. Like you launch it and it does this cool, weird, like plasma-y thing on your walls, and it flows outwards, and you see that that's my wall. No one else in the world is going to see this experience because it's my space.
Yeah, and that's the type of thing where you go in and for the next half hour you are in it for this type of musical experience, which is fine. The thing I was most compelled by and had the most maybe emotional response with was the Create app. And this is almost like a sandbox where right now it's a limited number of objects, but there's a library of static objects, animated objects, creatures and characters, and even mechanical objects that can connect together. And you place them in your world. So you map your world out. You have your hard surfaces, and I can drop in foliage and decorate my room with fauna, and then I can plop in a dinosaur, or plop in a knight, and they kind of exist and have a little AI.
Oh, you plop one in and it actually falls to the ground, and then it gets back up and it walks around. You can launch a UFO into your space, and it will fly around and abduct the things that you had dropped into your space.
I did something fun where I created like a barrier with furniture.
Okay.
And I dropped the dinosaur in there, and it couldn't get out. And I decided to have this headset on while watching a movie. And I watched the movie, and I was trying to see the opacity. The movie was fine, but I would occasionally look to the side, and my little pet dinosaur was in his little pen,
trapped.
Just trapped and hanging out there. It's like The Sims,
so like
but
you.
in my world.
Yeah, I like the ball stuff where you could actually set up a bunch of, not a ball maze, but little like half pipes that a marble can run down. You set those in curves and you have like a little funnel that can drop in at the top and you can literally build a physics toy.
Yeah.
You build that up, you drop a marble in and it rolls down and these things will snap to your wall.
Right.
They will snap to each other and you can pretty easily build these things. You can put a little black hole on the wall too, which is neat because it actually makes it look like there's a portal, like through your wall. You can walk right up to it and it's a pretty convincing illusion. And things that you've dropped into the world will fall into it.
I think that kind of persistence of virtual objects, not just instances that you launch once and then close, that's going to be the most compelling thing. That's the strongest thing I felt out of using this was what it felt like to really live with virtual objects in my physical space, things that other people couldn't see.
That's it though, because that's where I get frustrated because I was doing this with my family and it was like a solitary experience. Like I was having a cool time like placing things around and then I handed it off to somebody else and they wouldn't tell me what they're doing. Like they're starting to place things around the room and I'm like, what's that? What's that? And you can't see. There's no way currently for you to be able to see what they're seeing. There is a cast functionality, but I'm not sure if that's, like, there needs to be an easy way. Like, there just needs to be a dead simple way to show.
Asymmetrical AR, where I put a beacon in the room, a QR tracker, and I can have my phone, and someone can be wearing the headset, and I can still use the phone version
That's
of
a
AR.
great idea, yeah. I mean, you're not going to have families with multiple headsets, right?
Not yet.
Right.
Not yet. Well, that's the future. Maybe, at least that's what they're hoping. And that's not what this is right now. This is the Magic Leap 1 for a reason. It's developer kit. You know, $2,300 sounds expensive for people, but for people working in what they believe to be the future of computing, it's a reasonable cost.
It's $700 less than HoloLens.
Yeah, it's very reasonable for being able to work in that space because they're trying to sell TVs on the radio. That's their language, right? Like, it's hard to communicate that experience, even as a developer, unless you're actually using it. And for us, it's a small glimpse of what we hope to be future and also gives us a better understanding of what we want from AR, and what we thought we wanted from AR may not actually be what we want.
Oh, really? I think we know what we want. I just think we're frustrated by how long we have to wait. Like, this is a great product. For what it is, they did a good job. But it's not that thing that everyone's going to wear. It's not like what Google wanted with Google Glass, which is like the world to embrace it, to have it on your head at all times, in public, scanning the world, taking videos, you know, ideally like recognizing faces so that you remember their birthdays and that kind of thing. That's the future that I want. We are not there yet, my friend. We are a decade from that, it feels, at this point. And you know, this is a beautifully designed product. The industrial design is great, but man, I don't know what the consumer application is for this, to be honest with you. There's a lot of interesting entertainment possibilities.
Business opportunities?
Absolutely. Industry is going to go crazy for augmented reality, but I'm not sure if this is anywhere near being a consumer product in the sense that VR is ready for that.
Yeah, I am happy with the form factor. I know they'll have to figure out things with the optics, maybe even with the controller, but even if the Magic Leap 2 comes out and it looks just like this, I'd be comfortable wearing this in the house. You know, they have to reach a good price point, they have to reach a good set of applications, a killer app, for example.
Do you have one in mind? Can you imagine what a killer app could be?
Social. And there is a social app. It's not activated right now, but you create an avatar and you can project a person in the room with you. You know,
Another person.
Another person, yeah.
Who also wears a headset?
I think so. Yeah, yeah.
That's interesting.
I think people want to be connected by these devices.
Yeah.
And as VR may be and AR may feel like isolated experiences right now, the real power in them is how they're going to connect us in the future. So that's our kind of extended first week impressions with the Magic Leap 1. If you have additional questions, please post them in the comments below. We only have this for a couple more days, and hopefully be able to use this more in the future when we get our hands on another one.
Sounds good.